Good morning, everyone. This morning we'll continue with the appreciation of the Heart Sutra. And last week I talked about the title, and this morning I'm going to talk some about the first few lines, which go like this. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, doing deep Prajna Paramita, clearly saw emptiness of all the five conditions, thus completely relieving misfortune and pain. So, as I'm sure most of you know, a bodhisattva is one whose aim is to awaken, but in Mahayana Buddhism, of which Zen is part, we make an important distinction between someone who practices to attain individual liberation and the bodhisattva. The former feels that after realization, there's nothing to do. You get to the place where you see what is, realize life as it is, and that's the goal of practice. But the bodhisattva also has realizations, but what's realized is that it's the beginning, not the end of practice. And the bodhisattva has made vows not to remain in the state of oneness until every creature, animate and inanimate, has had the same realization. And Avalokiteshvara is one of the greatest bodhisattvas. She's represented as a female and embodies compassion. And her name is translated as she who hears the sounds of the world. And she hears all the painful cries for help and has a wonderful ability to help all beings in extreme danger and misfortune. And in China, she's called Guanyin, and in Japan, Kanon or Kanzeon. And here in the West, we often call her Guanyin, but in this chant, it's translated as Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, which is Sanskrit. So the line says, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva doing deep Prajna Paramita. Instead of doing deep Prajna Paramita, it could also be understood as Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva being deep Prajna Paramita. She is a manifestation of Prajna Paramita, the Great Mother. It infuses every pore, every hair, every bone of her being. Thus, everything she does is also Prajna Paramita. And everything she does is a manifestation of compassion. And she clearly saw emptiness of all the five conditions. So in our tradition, emptiness, impermanence, absolute can be considered as synonyms. When we say something is empty, it's empty of any fixed quality. That means all potential is available. It's always changing. That's the nature of everything. So all the five conditions are empty. The Sanskrit for the five conditions is Skandas, and it's also called heaps or aggregates. And they refer to the five aggregates. And here comes one. The five aggregates of clinging, the five material and mental factors that take part in the rise of craving and clinging. So they're constantly changing. And I'll talk a little later about what they are. They're not fixed. So it also says in these 3 lines that seeing clearly the emptiness of the 5 conditions completely relieved misfortune and pain. So that doesn't mean that being enlightened, that we put an end to pain. Suppose I'm enlightened and I gash my hand and blood spurts out and it's painful. That's Prajna Paramita. That's Prajna wisdom. I can't look at it and say this is good or bad, this is evil or saintly. I just take care of it. Not restricted by any notions of what it is. I take care of it directly. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva relieved all the pain and suffering in the world by becoming that pain. And according to the legend, the pain was so intense that her head exploded into 9 pieces. But to realize emptiness is to realize that everything is changing. And if it's changing, it means it's going to die this very instant. Which means each of us has within us a time bomb. We're going to die to this instant and then be reborn in the next instant. So we do the best we can in this instant. So, as I wrote in the newsletter, we must do the best we can each instant, as if it's our last instant, because it is. Now let me elaborate on some of the things that I just said. When I sat with Soen Nakagawa Roshi, I've mentioned before, he would have his students chant Namo Daibosa, Namo Daibosa, which means I am the great Bodhisattva. And in session, sometimes we would chant it while doing kinhin over and over again. And he wanted us to realize, I am the great Bodhisattva. So each one of us is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva doing deep Prajna Paramita. And if we realize that, then we realize the emptiness of the 5 conditions and completely relieve misfortune and pain. And at the end of our sitting, we chant the 4 great vows to affirm the fact that we are the great Bodhisattva. Not only did Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva have 9 faces and 1,000, she also had 1,000 arms and eyes. And we have a koan. It's in the Book of Equanimity, case 54, where Ungan asked Dogo, he said, what does a great compassionate bodhisattva do when she uses her manifold hands and eyes? What does she do with these thousands of hands and thousands of eyes? And of course, those of you who know it, say Dogo said, it's like a person at night reaching for the pillow. It's just natural functioning. When we see something that needs our help, we provide our help. We see something that needs our service, we provide our service. That's Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. So the emptiness of all things. This translation of shunyata to emptiness is kind of difficult. People who don't practice Zen often call it nihilistic, which means a viewpoint that traditional values and beliefs are unfounded and that existence is senseless and useless. But that's very far from Zen, has nothing to do with it. It certainly doesn't define emptiness. So in Japanese, the word is ku, which can be translated as sky. And Dogen wrote a fascicle called Koku, which means empty sky. So the clouds appear and they disappear. They arise and then they go away. But the sky remains, it's untouched. So shunyata means everything as it is. So it could be easily translated as fullness as well as emptiness. But whatever notion we have of shunyata is not shunyata, because it's everything as it is. And we think of it as a mirror too. It reflects whatever's in front of it. It could reflect something that's unpleasant or something that's pleasant, but the mirror itself, I don't think has a particular opinion about what it's reflecting. Now, the 5 skandhas, which are empty, the first one is form. And it refers to internal biological functioning and external physical appearance, form. And of course, later on in the Heart Sutra, it talks about form being emptiness and emptiness being form. And some of you have examined that carefully. But the second of the skandhas are feelings and sensations. These are empty also. And the third is our perceptions and thoughts. And the fourth refers to volition, impulse, and reaction, and it's associated with karma. Our propensity to work, to do things in a certain way, which is related to ethics and morality and orderliness. You could say the fourth skandha is also our conditioning. And using awareness of the first 3 skandhas, we're able to shift our conditioning and our karma. But it takes deep concentration and awareness. And the 5th skandha is consciousness and comprises the entire psychological realm. Now, if we look at the skandhas a little more closely, we see that associated with form is ignorance, in the sense of darkness, not seeing clearly. And enlightenment is the light that illuminates the darkness. And then arising from that ignorance is pride, which is associated with sensation, which is the second skandha. So associated with sensation is pride, which arises from ignorance. Then associated with perception is desire, which arises from pride. And associated with volition is jealousy, which arises from desire. And then associated with consciousness is anger, which arises from jealousy. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, so that all of these 5 conditions, these 5 skandhas, are empty. Yet when we cling to them, they're the very, or give rise to clinging. All of these characteristics of ignorance and pride and desire and jealousy and anger arise. And Bernie Glassman had this story to illustrate it, which I've talked about part of it before, but he said, suppose my 2 hands thought of themselves as separate entities, with independent entities and independent consciousness. Of course, it's just an analogy for all of us, because we think of ourselves as independent, with independent identities and consciousness. And Bernie always said the purpose of Zen is to realize the oneness and interconnectedness of life. So we have these 2 hands, and we'll call them Sam and Dave. They're independent, And if someone owes me money, they're just part of the one body, and Sam grabs it, then Dave gets jealous. And he gets jealous because he's ignorant of the fact that it's one body. So his ignorance gives rise to the jealousy. And then he has pride in the fact that he's Dave and that other guy, he's only Sam. I'm Dave. I'm better than him. And then he desires the money. But Sam got it. So out of the desire comes jealousy, and out of jealousy comes anger, until Dave finally attacks Sam. And I say, what the hell are you guys doing? One hand attacks the other, and I suffer. This type of drama goes on in the history of the world. I mean, we see it. If we don't see that we're all one, if we don't see the emptiness, and out of seeing that emptiness, the small self transforms into the one body, and jealousy is transformed into love and support. So let me talk a little bit more about suffering and pain. So this is kind of a big step for a lot of people, is to realize that suffering itself, the pain itself, is a functioning of the enlightened way, of prajna. I mean, we all have problems. I mean, that's what one of the First Noble Truths says, life is suffering. But we know how to deal with them when we see clearly. There's a famous koan where Uman said, every day is a good day. He didn't mean you would have no difficulties when he said every day is a good day. My teacher, Maizumi Roshi, said, every day is a good day, even when you're having difficulties. If we see clearly the nature of the 5 conditions, then we see that every day is a good day. Somebody said even a bad hair day is a good day. So, as is usually the case, we have to see things clearly. It's not like things somehow magically change, but we have to put our focus and our attention and our practice to seeing clearly what's going on. And in these times where things are so unsettled and there's so much rancor and divisiveness going on, it's easy to get knocked off balance. So I was telling one of you this morning in one of these memes, I said that had to do with worry, and people worry about all kinds of things. I have to admit, I look at some of the statements and election results by prominent people, and I say, wow, this is worrisome. But this meme said that worrying is very effective because 99% of the things I worry about never happen. So how can we find that state that it talks about in the Heart Sutra, relieving misfortune and pain?